San Quentin Prison, a fortress of towering stone walls and guard towers with snipers always at the ready. It's a place designed to crush any thought of escape with 3 sides locked down by concrete and the deadly waters of San Francisco Bay on the 4th. Getting out seems like a fool's dream. But in 1979, one man, a 59-year-old bank robber named Forrest Tucker, dared to defy the impossible. What followed was one of the most brilliant, audacious prison breaks San Quentin had ever seen. This is the untold story of how he did it. Forrest Tucker, the man who spent his entire life on the run, a career bank robber and a master escape artist over the decades, Tucker had broken out of 17 detention facilities starting in his teenage years, jails, prisons, detention centers. It didn't matter if Forrest was behind bars, he was already planning his way out in October of 1978. Tucker found himself sent to one of the most infamous prisons in the country. San Quentin, he was sentenced to 10 years, but if you knew anything about Forrest Tucker, you knew that serving time was never part of his plan. The minute those cuffs were slapped on, he was already working on his next move. His goal wasn't just to survive in San Quentin, it was to escape. Before long, Tucker found himself working near the harbor close to the workshops, one of the few places in San Quentin where there wasn't constant supervision. It was in the wide-open door he was looking for, but it was a crack, and cracks were all Tucker needed. He bided his time watching everything, keeping tabs and guards and routines. This spot by the water would be his first step toward freedom. But Tucker wasn't the only one with dreams of escape. San Quentin had plenty of inmates with similar ambitions, and one of them had been keeping an eye on Tucker. John Waller, a career criminal like Tucker, had earned a reputation of his own. People called him a rabbit, a nickname given to prisoners who were always trying to run. Waller was younger and maybe a bit more reckless, but he knew all about Tucker's escapes and had a feeling he could learn a thing or two from the old prob. The two of them started talking. It wasn't long before they were tossing ideas back and forth, each one wilder than the last. Tucker had the experience, Waller had the energy, and between them they figured they had a shot. And as it turned out, Waller knew a little something about boats, something that might come in handy when you're plotting an escape from a prison surrounded by water. So they hatched a plan. It was risky, but what escape wasn't for Forrest Tucker and John Waller. The stakes were always high, and maybe this time they pull it off. Tucker had full confidence in John Waller's boat-building skills, but he knew they'd need more than just 2 pairs of hands to pull off the escape building, and moving a boat without attracting attention was no small feat, especially inside the walls of San Quentin. Tucker figured they'd need someone else, someone who had the right mindset for escape and could keep quiet. That's when he suggested they bring in William Mecker, an old acquaintance of his. Mecker wasn't new to the idea of breaking out. Back in 1970, he pulled off a prison escape in San Francisco. He and some other inmates had clogged the toilets, causing enough chaos to simply walk out in the aftermath. It was a clever move that eventually got him sent to San Quentin. Might not have been as notorious as Tucker, but he had the same drive to break free, and Tucker knew he'd be a valuable addition to their little crew. When Tucker brought Mecker into the mix, Waller didn't hesitate. He respected Tucker's judgment if Tucker thought Mecker was the right guy for the job that was good enough for him. With a team in place, the 3 of them could now focus on their biggest challenge: how to build a boat inside one of the most secure prisons in the country. Waller had an advantage. He worked in the prison industry's warehouse, which gave him access to a variety of tools and materials. The workshops were filled with everything they'd need to construct their escape vessel: tools, wood, metal, whatever they could repurpose for their plan. The trick was taking what they needed without raising suspicion. But if anyone could pull it off, it was these guys under Tucker's direction. Waller began constructing the boat, piece by piece, using materials they quietly snagged from the workshops. Waller followed Tucker carefully thought out plans. It wasn't the first time Tucker had masterminded an escape, but this one would take patience, precision, and a lot of teamwork, with Mecker helping out where he could. The 3 men slowly but surely put together the vessel that would hopefully carry them to freedom. As the plan moved forward, Forrest Tucker found himself constantly on the move, buying supplies back and forth. Every tool, every piece of material had to be brought to the workshop without raising any alarms. Meanwhile, William M. Cogue, the quiet but essential third member of their crew, kept his mouth shut but stayed busy with an important task, figuring out the tides. One day, Macker managed to grab the tide report for the bay from a local newspaper. After studying the patterns, he delivered the news to Tucker. Their best chance for a smooth escape would be on August 9, 1979. But there was a catch, a big one. That same day, the Marin County Yacht Club was holding its annual bathtub regatta, meaning the bay would be swarming with yachts and their owners. The prisoners wouldn't be alone on the water. Tucker and Murr knew they couldn't change the date, it was their best window, so instead they leaned into the coincidence the plan disguised themselves as yacht club members. They scavenged the prison for materials that could pass as part of yachting outfits, crafting JY little caps and piecing together makeshift uniforms. They even decided to paint their boat in the club's colors, hoping it would help them blend in with the crowd of sailors on the bay. The plan wasn't perfect, but it was bold enough to work as the escape date loomed. Something unexpected fell into their laps on the morning of August 9th. A laser delivery driver left his truck unguarded at the loading dock near the warehouse. Tucker saw it as an opportunity they couldn't pass up. He sent Wall to check if the keys were left inside, and sure enough, they were sitting right in a drawer, as if waiting to be taken. This truck could be their ticket to getting the boat across the yard. Without raising suspicion, Waller came up with a diversion. He could drive the truck to where the water slowly and deliberately, making it look like just another routine delivery. Meanwhile, Tucker and MCR would carry the boat behind him, blending into the daily background noise of prison work. After all, inmates moving heavy objects was a common sight, and with Waller driving, no one could think twice about it. As Tucker watched it unfold, he could hardly believe it was working with Waller, creating the perfect distraction. He and McCarr carried the boat across the yard and down to the water right under guard tower number 4. Once there, they lowered it into the bay, careful to stay hidden from any eyes above McCarr, and Tucker crouched low, holding their breath as they waited for Waller to return the truck. Waller, with the same confidence he had shown from the start, parked the truck back where he found it, returned the keys to their spot, and strolled down the waters. Edge, the three men with their boat now floating beneath them, were closer than ever to freedom. They couldn't believe it. If this had been a scene in a movie, you might roll your eyes at the improbability, but here they were, against all odds, pulling it off. However, there was still one major question to answer: was the boat seaworthy? As soon as they hit the water, it became clear they were in trouble. The boat was watertight, but the water was choppy, and without any way to bail out, it began spilling over the sides desperately. They paddled their movements frantic. The boat started sinking right at the worst possible spot just outside the shipping lane, the final checkpoint in the AB bid for freedom. And then the unthinkable happened. They were spotted. A guard on shore, seeing them struggling, called out. But instead of sounding an alarm, he assumed they were part of the yacht club's regatta. He yelled, asking if they were okay. Maxer, usually the quiet, reserved one, came up with the line that would save them. He looked down at his bare wrist, pretending to check a watch that wasn't there, and called back, "Everything's okay. My Timex is still running." Amazingly, it worked. The guard bought the story, radioed in to say it was just some kayakers having a rough time, and went on with his day. But the boat was sinking fast, and just as they crossed the invisible boundary separating San Quentin from the rest of the bay, it went under. They were too heavy, the boat too small to handle the rough waters. All three men clung desperately to the sinking vessel, kicking for shore with everything they had. By some miracle, they made it cold, wet, and exhausted. They crawled onto land just outside San Quentin's walls. They'd done it. They were free, at least for now. But as soon as the adrenaline hit, Tucker, true to form, reverted to his lone wolf nature without a word. He took off running, leaving McCarr and Waller behind. Maybe they were surprised by his sudden departure, or maybe not. Taker was always one to move on when the job was done. Escape. Number 18 was officially in the books, and for Tucker, that was enough. San Quentin had been conquered. The trio scattered quickly, blending into the surrounding area before anyone realized they were gone. Their freedom didn't last long, though. M was captured just a couple of months later in October, hiding out near his girlfriend's apartment in San Rafael. Waller held out a little longer, making it until April of the next year before he was caught in Gilroy, about 100 mil away from San Quentin. Tucker, however, was nowhere to be found. Embarrassed, the state moved forward with a trial for Keir and Waller even without their ringleader, but the case was shaky at best, and after 2 trials ended in hung juries, both men were absolved of their crimes. As for Forrest Tucker, he stayed on the run for another 20 years, continuing his life of crime, but eventually his luck ran out. On October 20th, 2000, at the age of 80, he pled guilty to armed robbery and was sentenced to 13 more years behind bars. His body, however, couldn't keep up with his old tricks. He suffered several strokes while incarcerated and passed away on May 29, 2004, in a Texas prison. His life may have ended behind bars, but Forrest Tucker will always be remembered as the man who never stopped running.